Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. The national conflagration over sexual misconduct has burned another career up in smoke. Charlie Rose, been around for years on television, hosts shows on PBS and the morning show on CBS, has been suspended by both broadcasters tonight after 8 women have accused him of groping, lewd phone calls, and other forms of harassment. Meanwhile, Senator Al Franken is facing additional accusations tonight. A woman called Lindsay Menz claims Franken groped her while taking a photograph at a state fair. Menz recently tweeted this, quote, "In August 2010, Al Franken grabbed me while taking a picture together at the Minnesota State Fair. I felt violated and embarrassed." But Franken and Rose are not alone. More and more liberal women are sticking knives into the Clintons. Even MSNBC morning host Mika Brzezinski recently attacked Hillary Clinton, while California Congresswoman Jackie Speer took a shot at her husband, Bill. Watch.
Hillary Clinton needs to stop. She needs to stop talking about this topic unless Bill Clinton wants to come forward and apologize for being a sexual harasser, for settling with women.
Some Democrats and liberals have argued that a reevaluation of Bill Clinton's presidency is required. What do you think about that?
I think that the victims who came forward were not treated as they should have been. They should have been believed because, as I pointed out, most people who come forward are telling the truth.
Democrats notably more eager to attack a former president than a sitting U.S. senator whose vote they need, but still an amazing development. Tammy Bruce is a radio show host. She joins us tonight, as she often does, to sort it out. Tammy, what do you make of all this?
Well, they're a little late, aren't they? You know, talking about the Clintons at this point is like bringing out last year's turkey on Thursday. People are going to look at you and say, what? It's old.
Right.
It's bad. So this is what, look, it's absurd. I'm waiting for Congress to set up a committee to investigate Ted Kennedy and whether or not it's okay to leave a woman to drown in the bottom of a lake, because, boy, that's really bad, too. All of these people, here's what they realize, and this is what makes it so dangerous. They know that saying nothing before was wrong. They know that the women before, originally when this happened, that they were right. And now they, understandably, I mean, they've enjoyed being our moral superiors, and now they can't do it. And it is a bizarre, desperate effort to really rewrite history. It's like, well, you know, boy, that sure was awful. Most of us at the time knew it was awful. They're the only ones who are saying it wasn't or defending him. Everybody else in the country knew it, and somehow they didn't. So it's insulting, but it's also dangerous, because by doing this, Tucker, they're admitting that they knew it was wrong at the time, and they chose to do the wrong thing, and they don't care, and now they just simply want to redo it so that they can continue to attack Republicans, frankly.
That's right. NBC News refused to air allegations of rape against Bill Clinton because I guess we didn't know it was wrong then. I guess what's striking, though, you hear people say, well, both sides do it, and I think to some extent that's true. Human sin is a human problem. But it does seem disproportionately clustered on the side that claim to be allies of women. I mean, there is a kind of weird hypocrisy here where some of the people who tell you the most loudly about their feminism are the ones doing these things. Have you noticed that?
Right. It's not really about hypocrisy. Look, this is clearly a problem of power. It's not a problem of sex or attraction or desire, right? But interestingly, the people that have been crowing about, I'm your champion, I'm going to be defending you, I am the person you can rely on, almost as though it's a method in which to get closer to victims. It's that we would joke at now with the men that would show up at some of our rallies. We would say, well, maybe they're just there because they maybe know it'll be easier to get a date. Or the men who are supportive and very aggressively supportive about abortion. That it's a nature of who it is you're going to be associating with. And the presumption that if you're saying you're a champion for women, the doors will be unlocked faster. Women will not be necessarily concerned or afraid of you, and it gives you an open door. This is what I think makes it dangerously different when it comes to liberal men, well, like Glenn Thrush and others who have been these male feminists. Suddenly we find they're the victimizers. They're the attackers, if you will. And you have to wonder, is it because they felt that they would be around a group of women who would effectively be too ashamed, too frightened, too scared, especially scared to say something because it was their own group, and it was men that were told, like Harvey Weinstein or Charlie Rose or anyone else, that, well, we need them. I was told when I was in Now on the issue of Ted Kennedy and Bill Clinton, yes, they're pigs, but there are pigs, Tammy. that was not good enough for me.
No, it shouldn't be.
And the women complaining right now about and going after Clinton, whether Feinstein or Barbara Boxer or others who were, in the beginning of from the year of the woman, 1992, when they all got swept into the Senate. One of the first things they did was defend Ted Kennedy when he was under fire in, I believe it was 93. So from the beginning, it's been a fraud, Tucker. It's been a fraud for the women who've enabled it and a fraud for the men who've used it to gain access to women.
Well, you've seen it from the inside, so you can speak to that with great authority. I remember getting into a yelling match over Ted Kennedy when he died. He's a complicated guy with some good qualities. He liked dogs, for example, but he did kill a woman, and that you're not allowed to point that out. I remember that very well. So where does this leave us when the smoke clears and the last harasser has been forced out of his job? Does it change the way the left approaches feminism?
Well, remember, we're also talking not just about someone who says something that's rude or compliments a woman as she walks down the hallway. We are now talking about assault. And this is very different, but we tend to be now conflating a little bit the difference between a man who is complimenting a woman versus a man who is physically assaulting women.
Right.
We're going to have to sort those things out. And at this point, it really, Tucker, it's just common sense. And what these liberal men are doing is clearly an affront to what all of us already knew was wrong in the first place.
Right. No, I think that's right. A lot of it is common sense.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we sort of knew it all along. Tammy,
Right.
Thank you very much, as
Thanks,
always.
Tucker.
Well, Democrats plunge the rhetorical knives into the Clintons. Hillary Clinton is looking further afield to explain the collapse of her family's political dynasty. On Saturday, Hillary claimed her husband would never have become president if that dastardly Fox News has existed back in 1992. Watch.
Unfortunately, our body politic's immune system has been impaired because there has been a concerted effort, starting with the creation of the Fox network. It wasn't there when Bill first ran. It was one of the reasons he probably survived. They're delivering partisan advocacy positions, irrespective of the truth, the facts, the evidence.
It's a germ in the body politics, like Ebola. Mark Stein is another person who might have derailed the Clintons back in '92. Lucky for them, he was still writing about the arts at the time. He joins us now. I mean, what do you? I hate to agree with Mika Brzezinski, but maybe she was onto something when she said that Mrs. Clinton, Secretary Clinton, should, stop talking about this stuff.
I think so. This was their 25th anniversary gala of the great Clinton victory of 1992. And there were the two of them there with James Carville. And you got to bet that there were a lot of big shot Democrats who were invited to that who are no-shows. I mean,
right.
to go back to what Tammy was talking about, the Democrats are like this on everything. They didn't care. They weren't worried about the Russians during the Cold War. 25 years after it ends, they're worried about the Russians. They weren't worried about Bill Clinton's behavior when he was in the White House. 25 years later, the senators are now saying, oh, yes, he should have resigned over Monica Lewinsky. The New York Times ran a piece a couple of days ago called I Believe Juanita. Well, I wrote my I Believe Juanita piece I'm going to remember the exact date, February 25th, 1999 in the National Post of Canada. So I was right 18 and a half years ago when it mattered. And as Tammy said, they all knew that what Bill Clinton was doing, and it didn't matter. They trashed those women. There were all kinds of women. He liked all kinds of women. He liked young women, old women, svelte women, full-figured women, all kinds of women. And no matter what, he liked upper middle-class women. He liked women from trailer parks. He liked women generally. And no matter what kind of woman he trashed, the Democrats piled on in destroying all those women.
Yeah, I noticed it vividly. So what do you make of Hillary Clinton saying out loud, if Bill Clinton had been covered by a real news organization, Fox News, he never would have been president? That's not really an attack on Fox News. It seems more like a compliment to me.
Yeah, because a couple of minutes after that, they admitted that, in a sense, they faked his victory in New Hampshire. He lost the New Hampshire primary.
To Paul Tsongas.
To Paul Tsongas, who no one remembers now. But he stood on stage and declared himself the comeback kid. And at that time, ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN, which is all there was, went along with the comeback kid narrative. Just as when all the sex stuff came up, They went along with the old news, nothing to see here, time to move on narrative. And had Fox News been around, I've no doubt, I can imagine Sean Hannity doing one of his opening monologues, pointing out that in fact Paul Tsongas was the winner in New Hampshire, and it was nothing to do with Bill Clinton and his comeback kid. I mean, it would have been a very different environment for them.
But should she admit that the only reason he won is because the press was tame and obedient and refused to cover the actual news? I mean, that's what she's saying.
That's what they want, Tucker. I mean, don't forget, I mean, what is it that Bill Clinton, why are we in a mess now? Why shouldn't, I mean, look at it this way, why shouldn't Al Franken grope a woman? It's because the media told us it doesn't matter being a pig. Character doesn't matter. The fact that Clinton was a successful president meant anything he did in his private life was irrelevant. And the Democrats told us back then in the 90s, everybody does it. And now, as the opening of your show has pointed out, everybody does do it. They do it in Hollywood, they do it in Minnesota, they do it in the halls of Congress. They've got respected PBS anchors walking around naked in front of female, and I don't mean Big Bird, other ones walking around naked in front of female staffers. It's where did that come from? Everybody didn't do it until Bill Clinton re-established droit du seigneur on an industrial scale.
Mark Stein, like nobody else. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Tucker.
A U.S. Border Patrol agent is dead tonight after being attacked at the border in the most gruesome possible way. Will this change any minds about addressing illegal immigration and securing the border once and for all? We'll find out next.
Carlson is brought to you by
An American Border Patrol agent murdered, another one wounded after both were attacked while patrolling the U.S.-Mexico border. Fox's Trace Gallagher has the latest details on this crime. Trace?
Hi, Tucker. We know the border agents responded to a sensor that was triggered off Interstate 10 near the Big Bend area of the Texas-Mexico border. That's a difficult part of the border for illegal immigrants to cross because of the mountains, the Rio Grande River, and the overall rugged terrain. Somehow, when the two agents arrived, they got into trouble. One of them called on the scanner saying they'd been hurt and they needed help. Both agents were then transported to an area hospital where 36-year-old Rogelio Martinez died from his injuries. Martinez had been an agent for 4 years. The FBI says the agents were not fired on, but they would not elaborate on how they were injured. The National Border Patrol Union says Martinez was hit several times in the head with a blunt object, possibly a large rock. The Border Patrol itself has not confirmed that, but here's what President Trump said. Watch.
We lost a Border Patrol officer just yesterday, and another one was brutally beaten and badly hurt. It looks like he'll make it, but very badly hurt.
The president also vowed to continue building the wall to secure the U.S.-Mexico border. Agents being hit with rocks is very common along the border. In fact, Border Patrol vehicles and helicopters have also been targeted quite often by rock throwers. Right now, investigators are looking for potential suspects and witnesses, but if those suspects are on the south side of the border, the task becomes much more difficult. The Department of Homeland Security says that since 2003, 38 Border Patrol agents have been killed in the line of duty. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher in Los Angeles. Thanks a lot, Trace. Jose Magana is an immigration advocate, and he joins us in the studio tonight. Jose, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
So, an armed and trained federal agent murdered by blunt force, probably by rocks. Why should that not scare the rest of us?
I think the situation is that that's not the norm at the border. The border, according to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, in a study 2 months ago, argued that the border is more secure than it's ever been, with 85% of undocumented immigrants being apprehended before they even enter the country.
Right, so 15% weren't. So it's not secure. I mean, by that definition, it's not secure. Here's the point. Look, I'm not I grew up next to Mexico. I like Mexico, super nice people. Most immigrants are nice people.
I'm Mexican myself, Tucker.
But There's been a civil war, in effect, going on in Mexico for years. Over 110,000 people have been murdered in Mexico. Okay, it's one of the most violent countries in the world. If it were any country but Mexico, and there wasn't this weird politics hovering over it, we would say, holy smokes. This is one of the most dangerous places in the world, right on our border. We need to make certain we know the identity of every single person who comes in or out. But we don't because of advocacy by people like you, because we somehow can't? I don't understand.
Well, Tucker, in 2013, we had the opportunity to fund over $43.6 billion, a good portion of that would go to border security through S744, the bill that would legalize a large portion of the undocumented population. It had enormous border security provisions, and if you want to be mad at someone, you should be mad at the Republicans in the House that refused S744.
Wait, hold on. No, wait a second. Why should we legalize anybody? It's our country.
Tucker.
I'm serious. We have a moral right to secure our borders. Again, I'm not impugning the character of Mexican citizens, many of whom I like. I'm just saying over 110,000 people have been murdered in that country in recent years. It's one of the most violent countries in the world. Why in the world, if you cared about the security of Americans, wouldn't you just shut down any border crossing except legal border crossing?
Well, according to DHS, the border is more secure now than it's ever been in the history of the United States, and more funding would have been allocated to the border if not for Republicans attacked S744.
Then you got to legalize everybody, and all their family gets to move here. And like, what? No, I don't think people who are here legally get to decide what our policies are. In what world? Mexico doesn't allow that kind of nonsense. So, like, be quiet. You're not a citizen. Go away. I'm serious. You know that's true.
The United States doesn't set its immigration policies based on what other countries does, Tucker. It sets and exercises its leadership based on what's just and fair and what aligns with our nation's commitment to equality and the melting pot.
There's massive lobbying by the governor of Mexico, which uses illegal emigration from Mexico as a pressure relief valve to keep their country from melting down, because it's a corrupt place with a bad economy. And we are lobbied by them every single day, and you know that that's true. So don't pretend it's not.
Well, Tucker, I think you're ignoring the fact that net migration from Mexico is at net zero and has been for the past several years. The fact that you're portraying the southern border as a flood of individuals coming isn't necessarily accurate.
People come from South America and from Central America through Mexico into the United States, and that is allowed, indeed encouraged, by the Mexican government, which doesn't want to deal with illegals in its borders either. So they come to our country, again, with the help of the Mexican government. I'm telling the truth, and you know that I am. And my point is, like, why should we put up with that? This is nuts. Like, let's stop pretending.
Because under our own immigration laws, we have a humanitarian responsibility to those Central Americans fleeing violence and persecution. Because under the INA, if you are being persecuted in your home country, you have an opportunity to present your case for relief here in the United States.
Really?
And these are mothers and children fleeing horrific violence in these Central American families.
There are over 1 billion people who are fleeing violence and poverty around the world. I don't understand what gave the United States the unique obligation to put them all in federal assistance. I mean, this is insane. Where does that come from? Is that in the Constitution? Like, so who made this up? And why do the rest of us have to stand here and be like, oh, absolutely, it's our obligation? Like, where does that come from, that obligation?
Our international obligations stem from the Immigration and Nationality Act and the various treaties that this nation has adopted that essentially said if you're being persecuted because of your race, because of your religion, if people are trying to murder you and your country won't help you, you can apply, and it's not a guarantee, to come to this country and obtain refugee or asylum status.
Tell an unemployed American, and there are about, let's just see, 100 million of them in this country, why that serves their interests. Because the U.S. government is supposed to be looking out primarily for their interests. How do they benefit from that? Oh, wait, there's no answer, because they don't, and you know that.
Well, at the end of the day, economists from both the progressive and the conservative side have consistently said that immigration is good for our country, that immigration lifts all boats.
Has it been good for California, which is poorer now than it's ever been?
I think California cherishes its immigrants. That's why it's passed various laws.
But as an economic, and I hear this line, but it's a lie, and you know it's a lie. California is poorer because of immigrants. It's got more poor people than any state in the union. Union. It was the richest state in the country 30 years ago. So, like, if this magic formula works, where has it worked? Name a place where it's worked.
I think I would say both the Center for American Progress and Cato Institute, from opposite spectrums, arguing that immigration
if you've got the Dalai
is good
Lama
for
saying
California.
so.
And the fact that California legislators have encouraged immigrants being in their
Because there's a massive political lobby, as you know, but it's an economic matter. Name one state or municipality that has become more prosperous because of low-wage immigration.
Center for American Progress has a state-by-state analysis
Name
of
one.
how
Okay, go ahead. Name one.
Every single state, Tucker, no state has experienced negative economic growth as a result of immigration. And regularizing the status of the 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country would promote economic growth and restart this country's economic
Let me just say that that is a lie, and you know that it's a lie, and you can go to Lowell, Massachusetts, or Lewiston, Maine, or any place where large numbers of immigrants have moved into a poor community, and it hasn't become richer, it's become poorer. That's real. Go there. Do you know what I'm talking about, or no?
I think at the end of the day, this contributes to the narrative that we've seen in our nation consistently, that oftentimes immigrants are scapegoated for economic woes.
I'm not scapegoating anybody. I'm asking you to prove your contention that immigration is always good for the economy. And
I would point to the repeated economic studies done by a wide variety of reputable think tanks from all across the political spectrum.
Look, we're out of time, but you've lived here, you said 5 years. Is there anybody dumber than a think tank employee in D.C.? Honestly, I've been here 30 years, and I'm asking you a
I'm a lobbyist, so probably a lobbyist, I would say.
There's nobody, just answer, there's nobody dumber or more detached from reality. I know that for a fact. Thank you so much
for joining
us. You know what I'm talking about. Well, statues to come down across America. Washington, D.C. is very close to putting up a new statue. To whom? Marion Barry, of course, the mayor we made famous by sending out video of him smoking crack. A city councilman from D.C. who supports the Barry statue joins us next. Across America, during our own Cultural Revolution, all kinds of statues are being torn down for all kinds of offenses, whether it's racism or imperialism or existing more than 200 years in the past. But here in Washington, D.C., the city council wants to build a brand new statue honoring deceased Mayor Marion Barry. Barry, of course, had a long history of racially charged remarks. He was a convicted drug offender, too. Does he deserve the high honor? Jack Evans is a longtime D.C. city councilman. Everyone in town knows Jack Evans. He supports the Barry statue. He joins us tonight. Jack, thanks for coming on.
Oh, Tucker, thanks for having me.
So no one would deny the charm of Marion Barry. I know you served with him on the city council for a long time, but roguish doesn't really begin to capture Barry. He was like truly a terrible mayor and openly a race baiter and kind of without real achievement. Why would you make him the subject of a statue?
Well, I have to say, he was an iconic figure here in local Washington.
He was, for sure.
Without a doubt. And so it was one of my ideas to have a statue to him because of what he was able to do for the African-American population in our city and for the city itself. Now, remember, you wind the clock back when he came into office in '78. The city was new. First elected mayor was in '75. And he was able to, in his first term at least, really create a Washington that we have built on since that time. Created the black middle class here. He had a summer jobs program.
Maryland. I mean, if you look at you're on the city council for a long time. You know the numbers better than I. But the black middle class and the middle class period, but especially the African American middle class, fled the city under Barry because it was a disaster.
Well, I wouldn't say that's why they fled. They fled after the '68 riot.
For sure.
And then when Barry became mayor in '78, we started to really kind of rebuild our city. And today, as you know, Tucker, we're adding 1,000 people a month.
We are, yeah, no, it's
80,000
way better.
In the city, yeah. And again, you go across the city, many African Americans got their first job in Marion Barry's summer youth program. And again, remember in '78, it was very hard for an African American to get a job anywhere. Federal government was kind of opening up.
He went on
and Barry really was someone
but he humiliated the city. He betrayed the hopes of the people who believed in him. He was a full-blown crackhead, as you know. He got busted and went to jail the first time, but then he got busted again. He got busted giving his girlfriend a city contract. A bunch of his aides went to jail. Cornbread Givens, remember him?
Remember Cornbread? Yeah,
I remember Cornbread
Cornbread
Givens. Here then. But he also had a long history of saying things like this, quote, "We've got to do something about these Asians coming in, opening up businesses, those dirty shops. They ought to go." What do you think Asians in Washington will think of the Barry statue?
Well, I would say he has a lot of support in all of the communities, even in the Asian community. I mean, you remember Tony Chang and a lot of people in the Chinese community were very strong supporters of Marion Barry.
What if somebody else said, we've got to do something about these Asians coming in?
Yeah, you can't defend a lot of things that many people say or do, and so I'm not defending Marion Barry on that. And as you know, he later was very apologetic for making those kind of statements. But I think in the totality, Tucker, is what we're looking at here. The totality for the local government, the man was elected mayor 4 times, and he was revered in many parts of the city. And so we're looking for a way of honoring his legacy to the city.
Jack.
And I think you have to look.
In many parts. He was hated in almost all parts of the city.
Oh no, Tucker, that's
look,
not
there
true.
was racial division at the heart of it. Look, I was here. I remember.
But
he gets reelected in '94, and the first thing he does is attack white voters and say, "quote, get over it."
But remember what prompted that statement? There was just utter disbelief.
There was. I get it.
Made
but
that
like,
statement.
look, you can't talk like that if you're the mayor of a city, can you?
Well, you can. And he had a roguish quality to him, as you know. And I think that endeared him to people. And I got to tell you, I traveled the city and the world with Marion Barry, and he was really a larger-than-life figure. God, I remember being in Africa with him. I was in Cape Town. People, Soweto, I'll never forget being in Soweto outside of Johannesburg with Marion Barry, and people were coming out of their houses to see him. He was really on
Jack,
that
I can't get the street in front of my house paved, and you guys
that's
are
not true. If you
in South
tell me your
Africa
street,
eating prawns.
No, we're not eating prawns.
Come on now.
Making
Why in the world? This is like the whole problem.
But he had a great sense of humor.
I bet he did. If I was in Cape Town on government expense, I'd be in a great mood too.
Being in Soweto with him, and we're walking down the streets getting dark, and I said, Marion, I think we need to get back to the bus. And he said, what you mean we?
He was funny, I'll admit that. Let me just ask you, is there anything you could find out about Marion Barry? Cannibalism, human sacrifice, anything that would change your mind?
No, he didn't do any of those things. And frankly, I think Marion Barry really, again, because of his legacy in the city, deserves a statue. So we're going to have it. It's going to be in front of City Hall, and it's going to be great. So,
really quick, can I throw, because I'm deeply offended by his opposition to gay marriage, for example. He was the only city council member against, as you know. But if I'm offended by this, can I throw a sheet over? Why not? Because it actually, my sensibility is very delicate. We've known each other a long time. You know that. So when I throw a sheet over his statue to protect my children's eyes from it, what will you do?
You can throw a sheet over it, and we'll just take it off. That'll be all right. In America, you can do things like that.
No, you can't. You get arrested if you do.
Can you help me get rid of the Albert Pike statue, though? We have a statue in my ward, 3 blocks from the United States Capitol, and he is a former Confederate general, the only Confederate general.
That's fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with that as long as you don't rub the disaster of Marion Barry in the noses.
Marion is a local hero, and we're happy to have this statue. So will you come to the unveiling?
Not in a million years. No. Thank you, though, Jack. It's great to see you. NFL player Marshawn Lynch had plenty of respect for the Mexican national anthem, but not for this country's. The president got mad at him, says he ought to be suspended from the league. We'll discuss that idea coming up. Sunday's NFL game between the New England Patriots and the Oakland Raiders was no contest. The Patriots dominated, as God intended. Instead, the real drama was on the sidelines beforehand. The game was held in Mexico City, and Raiders player Marshawn Lynch stood for the Mexican national anthem, but then sat down for our own, the Star-Spangled Banner. The president noticed this. He tweeted, quote, Marshawn Lynch of the NFL's Oakland Raiders stands the Mexican national anthem and sits down to booze for our national anthem. Great disrespect. Next time the NFL should suspend him for the remainder of the season. Attendance and ratings way down. Anthony Tall is a lawyer and sports agent, and he joins us today. Anthony, thanks a lot for coming on.
How you doing, Tucker?
I'm doing great. So I just want to stipulate that I think all of this behavior is allowed under the First Amendment, so I don't think there's any debate over whether it's protected as speech. Of course it is. The debate is over how grotesque it is, and I don't understand why Marshawn Lynch is under the impression that Mexico is a more virtuous country than his own. Where would he get that idea?
Well, I think that you need to go and ask yourself, why would a rich athlete feel as if another country is better than him? And it goes back to what LeBron James said. LeBron James said being black in America is hard. It doesn't matter how much money you have, who you are, how much fame you have. So I think Marshawn Lynch is evidence of that. So you also have to ask yourself, what would drive someone, a multi-million-dollar athlete, to stand during the Mexican national anthem and not want to stand on his own? This isn't something that he just comes up with. Where does that come from?
It's just,
and I'm going to say that it comes from a lot of statistics. Go ahead.
Yeah, but what it doesn't come from is a deep knowledge of Mexico. I mean, if you're doing that to the Swiss anthem, okay, we could debate it, or the French anthem, we could debate it. But have you seen the people who run Mexico? Is there a country in the world with a firmer color bar than Mexico? I don't think there is. Is there a country with a more grotesque history of slavery than Mexico? How do Afro-Mexicans do? Do you have any idea? Does Marshawn Lynch have any idea? I mean, let's be real here. You'd rather be black in America than Mexico any day of the week.
Well, I think Marshawn Lynch and a lot of black people might differ with you. They might say it's worse being in America than being in Mexico.
Oh, really? And why would they say that?
A lot of these athletes that travel around the world, they get treated a lot better in their perspective than they do here in America. That's why they say that. That's their experience.
I don't think Marshawn
We're not
Lynch
talking about Afro.
Yeah,
we're not talking
let's just be real, okay? Barack Obama could not have been elected president of Mexico. They have major race problems in Mexico, and we pretend that Mexico is this sort of unified Hispanic country. That's not reality, and anyone who says that knows nothing about Mexico. I'm not attacking Mexico, that's just true. So I guess I wonder, like, does he know anything about Mexico? And by the way, how badly is Marshawn Lynch treated when he goes to dinner? Or do people yell at him at dinner? I mean, can we just be real for a second? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, we're keeping it as real as possible. You just need to realize that Marshawn Lynch grew up in Oakland. He's probably seen a lot of police brutality, seen a lot of his friends get shot and probably injured by police brutality. And he's also, everywhere he goes, no one concerned about his wealth. All police see is dreadlocks a lot of times. So in Marshawn Lynch's mind, the way he's treated here, as opposed to when he goes to Mexico or Europe, is a lot better. You got to remember, there's a history of African Americans leaving America. And don't get me wrong, I love this country. There's a history of African American celebrities and athletes going all the way back to Josephine Baker in 1919, leaving this country for a better life, going to France. She went to France. She went to France.
I'm very aware of that. She did not go to Mexico. Look, okay, here's the real point, that when you're a famous person who commands the attention of an entire country and has reaped such profound rewards to that country as Marshawn Lynch has, it doesn't mean that you have to love the country, but it means you can't be as mindless as he is. You can't say something that's so stupid like, I would be treated better in Mexico. That's insane. And don't you think it's incumbent on him to maybe learn something before weighing in on a topic this divisive? Or no?
Absolutely, absolutely. But I don't know his history of study in Mexico. I don't know, but I would concede that point. Absolutely. Yeah. I would assume that he's probably hasn't read all of Mexican history, just like he hasn't read all of American history.
So you don't need to read all of. Look at the people who run the country.
I can also assume that he's smart enough to base his opinion on how he's treated when he's down there, on how people talk to him, how he's received when he goes to hotels.
Because it's not all about him, actually, and I know this is news to a lot of rich athletes. It's not all about you. There's a broader world beyond your experience and your reality. And look, the point is that gestures like this influence a lot of other people, and maybe they should be thoughtful and not reactionary and stupid like this.
Well, I think he has a right, as you said, the First Amendment right to do what he wants to do. So I'm glad you attached with that issue. But he also has to be more concerned about the broader scope of the way African Americans have been treated in this country, so we can make it a better country.
Good luck in Mexico.
Nothing wrong with making this a better country.
Yeah, well, he's not doing it. But anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate it. State governments have a new weapon to make Americans pay off student loan debt. They're going to take away their ability to earn a living in the first place or even drive a car. Yes, it's actually policy, and we've got details on that coming up. A recent report by the New York Times highlights a pretty shocking new practice used by state governments to force students to repay student loans, make it impossible for them to work otherwise. In 19 U.S. states, authorities have the power to suspend professional licenses, like nursing licenses, if a borrower goes into default on a student loan. In the state of South Dakota, borrowers can lose their driver's license, making it basically impossible to get to work in the first place. Brian Brenberg is an associate professor of business and economics at the King's College in New York, and he joins us tonight. Brian, thanks for coming on.
Good to be here.
I'm a little shocked by this. I mean, is there any other, just to set the baseline, is there any other kind of loan, if I'm late on my mortgage or my credit card, can they make it illegal for me to do my job or take my driver's license away?
No, and I think because people would find this completely shocking. I mean, the idea that the way you're going to deal with people who can't pay their bills is to take away their job, it sounds nonsensical on its face, and it absolutely is. It's a classic case of the government creating a problem and then piling more policy on top that only makes the problem worse.
And student loans, I know you're a college professor, I don't want to beat up on, but colleges are the richest institutions in American life. Drive through any state, and these little pockets of affluence are colleges. And yet those colleges are bankrupting an entire generation of young people who can't buy cars or get married or buy homes because of their student loans. And now they can't work or drive. Like, who is in charge of this?
Well, we have been shoveling billions of dollars at colleges and universities to push students into educational programs that don't give them any place in the marketplace. They can't get a job, and so they go out into the marketplace. They can't find a job. They maybe finally find something that allows them to pay their bills, but because they're behind on their student loans, the state says you can't do this job anymore. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. The one thing we want young people to do in this country is to get a job, to work, get out in the marketplace. Anything that keeps them out of that is going to be counterproductive.
So, but I mean, a lot of these lenders too are obviously getting rich. I've met some of them, really rich. But how did they get it into the law that if their loans don't get repaid, as distinct from all the other loans people have, there's a legal punishment?
Because the state guarantees, the state will either guarantee or subsidize these loans, so the state has an interest in it. And when they don't get paid back, they look for a way to deal with that. And you can do that by putting a lien on people's property. You can do that by garnishing wages. But they came up with this idea that they're going to keep people from working. And again, the reason that exists is because in this country, so many people have to get a license to do their job. So you've got government pushing people into educations that don't help them. And then they've got, on the other end, governments approving the work they can do and taking away that approval when the person's in dire straits financially.
And it's destroying a generation. When you look at the polling of young people and they support socialism over capitalism, and you're wondering, why are young people so mad and so crazy? Student loans are driving a lot of that.
Absolutely. It's absolutely the case. But look, there's a lot of young people who are saying, well, we should get the government more involved in student loans. We should get the government more involved in the economy. This is what happens when you do that. The right and the left hand of government don't pay attention to each other. You end up pushing people in education that they can't use. Then you say they can't do the job that they've actually found. If you want more government in those spheres, this is what you're going to get.
How long till debtors' prisons come back?
Well, I think we're talking about debtor prison right now, Tucker. It's just a different name.
It sounds that way. Brian, this is even worse than I thought. Thank you.
You bet.
A strange aircraft was spotted flying over the West Coast the other day. True story, by the way. What was it? And does its mysterious flight suggest that we are vulnerable to something? We'll ask a defense expert to get to the bottom of an actual mystery. Stay tuned. Defense experts, UFO enthusiasts, all scratching their head in the wake of an appearance of a mysterious aircraft over the West Coast last month. The Air Force, the FAA, individual pilots all agree that an unknown aircraft of some kind was traveling north above Oregon. What was the plane? Why was it there? And why can't we know for certain? Because nobody does at this point. Tyler Rogaway is editor of The War Zone. It's a defense news site, and he joins us tonight. Tyler, this is a pretty well-traveled air lane from what I can tell. Why in 2017 don't we know what this was?
You know, and that's the crazy thing about this is one of those rare deals where with all the corroboration, including the FAA and NORAD and pilots, we still have no idea what this aircraft was. Now, it could very well be, Tucker, that the FAA and the DOD are looking into this and they're going to potentially figure out what this was, or they might already know. But we just don't know at this time. And it definitely is a quality assurance issue for the FAA.
Quality assurance issue. Yeah, and there's some other concerns about it too. So what did it look like, did they say?
Well, all we know, it was a white aircraft. It had the same type of performance as a jet. It was flying at between 35,000 and 40,000 feet, where probably you fly all the time when you travel.
Commercial airliner, yeah.
And yeah, and so it looked like, but nobody could make out the type. So that does leave it a little bit questionable, as if it was an airliner or potentially a military aircraft.
But an airliner would, of course, be identified. It would have a transponder on, right?
Right. This did not have any communications, no transponder, so no identification or altitude for Seattle Center to see, and it was not really trackable on radar. They did not have a consistent primary return. So this had all three going for it. It basically wasn't there, aside from the pilots that literally were asked by Seattle Center to look outside and say, hey, is it there? And all of them did see it. And it was this went on for multiple, 10, 15 minutes, and possibly longer. We just don't have the radio tapes for that other section of Seattle Center, the area that they control.
Well, that's just absolutely bizarre and kind of threatening. I mean, you'd think that our air traffic control would have a handle on what's in a commercial airlane, no?
Yeah, I mean, they were really trying to figure out what was going on. They launched F-15s after this, Tucker, and those jets at that base have the most powerful air-to-air radar in the world and other upgrades, and they couldn't find it. Even NORAD told me, they said they went up and they looked around, and it wasn't there.
So what are the options? I mean, if the F-15s couldn't find it, then what could it be?
Right, and that's really what a lot of people are asking, of course. And some people say maybe it was a smuggler, somebody that bought a Lear for very cheap that was not flyable and just flew it for some reason, maybe up to Canada. That's very improbable. Another one is maybe a military aircraft that's straight off the range, like an unmanned system. The DoD is working heavily in the high end of unmanned aircraft space that they don't talk about. And you remember in 2011 when an RQ-170 Sentinel stealth drone, surveillance drone, fell into the hands of Iran. That aircraft strayed from its course and actually fell, like I say, into the enemy's hands. So the idea that it could potentially fly into Oregon off one of the ranges in northern Nevada isn't totally out of the question.
Right, and there are other explanations too, which we'll leave to the imagination of our viewers. Tyler, thank you very much for that.
It was great being here. Thanks, Tucker.
Thank you. That's about it for us tonight. Boy, that hour went fast, but we are back every night at 8 p.m., the show that is the sworn enemy, and we mean it, of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. DVR it if you can figure out how to make that machine work. Good night from Washington. Sean Hannity is up next.
All right, Tucker, thank you. What a news night. Welcome.